Hi,
Lara, hi,
hi.
how are you doing today?
I'm doing. It's the end of the day. I'm going to bed soon. I waited up to talk to you.
And you keeping well? All good with yourself and family and friends?
Thank God. As I said, exiled in Florida. I'm from New York City. About 10 people in my building are positive with COVID. So I'm just really grateful that I have somewhere else to be.
That's amazing. Well, I wish you, safety and joy in isolation and hopefully more Zoom calls. So just wanted to
Lots,
introduce,
lots of Zoom calls. I live
exactly,
on Zoom right now.
exactly. So I just wanted to introduce my friend Lara Stein for the participants in our Code 19 hackathon hosted by the Motwani Foundation. Lara Stein, as probably most of you know, is as highly regarded in the TEDx community as one of the early crafters, designers. Probably the DNA of the TEDx community, which is spread across the globe now. It's just thousands and thousands of chapters. Lara is now full time launching an extremely important global platform, online platform for having impact, for enabling impact globally, social impact globally. And as it turns out, I mean, what better time when the world is moving from the paradigm of face-to-face connections to online connections. This pandemic has thrown us into a brand new portal and a new paradigm of really working from remotely from our dens in an online community. And what better community to share this with? The developer community, which has traditionally been the DNA of the whole open source movement. And hackathons, Lara, as you know, have been around for many years. People have been doing these hackathons to enable, actually, to sort of entangle and really connect up the hacker community, the developer community, to come up with solutions, especially in times of major disasters. Could be even hurricanes and things like that. But this is a pandemic, which is just such a it's a big global event. And what we have done is we launched this hackathon in India last week to really kind of ignite the community of developers to come up with local solutions, small local solutions, developing apps and other leveraging other technologies for helping the bottom of the pyramid to really understand what this pandemic is, and to be better prepared with knowledge, connectivity, and with just the other tools for meeting their basic needs. So Lara, tell us a little bit about what is Boma, and how do we, at the sort of the hackathon community, sync up with you guys and really multiply our impact jointly.
Thank you, Ash. So coming out of TED, where I created this platform where they gave voice to a lot of great stories around inspiration, Boma is really a decentralized organization that is focused on how we can come together to intentionally and intelligently drive and design a better future. And we have country partners around the world right now that are focused on how do we drive real impact? How do we find local innovation in communities around the world? And how do we really think about elevating that local innovation to drive global impact? The whole design originally of TEDx was based on my deep respect for the open source community. TEDx was, in a sense, applying some of the open source frameworks to a conference model. How do we decentralize it? How do we give voice to people that would not normally have a voice? It was a free license. And so Boma is really building on that concept of how do we empower people and communities around the world to solve some of our big global challenges. If you really think about it, all the challenges mankind faces today are deeply interconnected. They are big global problems, but they're not going to be solved by any one nation state. They really have to be solved by decentralized communities around the world that find the innovation and also find the intellectual input, and then it rolls up to create these global solutions. And I think COVID's one example, and it's exactly what Boma was designed for, which is this idea that a global pandemic is not going to be solved by one country. We're an interconnected ecosystem. So how do we find the innovations, the best innovations around the world that can help communities, cities, countries share that innovation, and how do we elevate it in a way that is meaningful so we can come together to solve this major, global pandemic. And my big frustration right now is that so many of our global leaders are being more divisive than they are really thinking in this way. They're not bringing people together to say, let's come together as a global community on this one little blue planet to solve our problems, and let's find ways to share the innovation, and let's collaborate as a scientific community. The politicians are politicizing it in a way that is so divisive. And so I think my hope and my passion has always been, from the bottom up, how do local communities around the world find these solutions, and then how do we create frameworks to help them connect and elevate them to solve problems?
So how do you, in this post-pandemic world, right? While there is a lot of, sad misfortune that's going on around us, I also see a sort of an unprecedented opportunity for all of us who are in the entrepreneurship business to really start thinking now from the ground up on what is going to occupy that space, that post-nation state space. By the way, speaking of post-nation state, isn't it amazing that all of us had our main theme this year in Davos as a post-nation state world? Isn't that amazing that we had somehow we had sensed that something was going on, and our whole, our team in Davos was all focused on a post-nation state world. I mean, as we step into this new world, Lara, where do you see, do you see an opportunity for all of us to be creating institutions, right? Sort of global, flexible, online institutional frameworks that can sometimes be, that can actually take the space that might be being left behind by not just the nation state world, but also old entities like the WHO, and which are great, by the way. They're doing great work right now, but they're so deeply mired in the whole, the funding and the financial dependence on the nation state world, that they are, as you can see, they're getting jerked around right now. What kind of an opportunity do you see in front of us right now, where if people like us really put our heads together, what kind of global, flexible institutions are likely to emerge, which will then take responsibility and that people can trust, for saying, okay, here is the truth about what is going on with this pandemic. Here is the truth about what kind of testing protocols are available, what kind of medicine is available. Is there can there be these kind of go-to places that one can craft from the ground up right now? What do you think?
So I have days where I really believe this will be a wake-up call and people are listening, and we can think about how do we reinvent systems for that post-nation state world that really cater to everybody across socioeconomic groups, all stakeholders. And we take this as a moment to take a deep breath and learn from what's going on here, to reinvent systems that would drive a more fair and sustainable future for this planet. Mm-hmm. And then I have days where I just look at what's going on politically and I'm so depressed because I feel like we're going to learn nothing. We're going to go into a deep economic crisis at the end of this and eventually emerge having learned nothing, right? And so I kind of flip-flop back and forth between those states right now. And so I really, I want to have hope, and I think the hope is in two things. It's in the innovation community, and especially the open source innovation community. And the second is in communities. I think just general communities. I think we have the power to come together because of technology in new kinds of ways. And I think we can mobilize to put pressure on our existing politicians, our existing systems, to say, we want a different world right now. And this is a moment where we have a lot we can learn from what is going on to drive this world forward in a better way. And so my hope is that we can mobilize, and that's why I created Boma. It's the fourth global community I've built, and I'm building from the ground up because I really want to try and empower people to understand that we can build better systems on this planet, and we have the access to the tools, and everybody has access to the tools. It's the choices we make. And also part of Boma's mission is to work with CEOs and leadership to say, in this moment right now, a world that's moving so quickly, how do you step up to be a courageous leader? How do you step up to think about what are the right decisions to be making in order to drive both profitability, but humanity forward in a way that it's meaningful and in a way that we can create sustainability on the planet right now. And also in a way that it's, there's gender equality, there's, all these issues within organizations that will allow us to be a more intentional, intelligent,
You know,
community, humanity.
you just said a very important word here, Lara, which is how to mobilize. How to mobilize these communities to start. So we are not only empowering, but we are mobilizing them to kind of, to start exercising some muscle in the democratic systems that we live in right now. Right now, what's happening is we are, uh, it's pretty clear to me that we are quite powerless right now. We individuals who are still connected, we are all, we are, we've gone through so much and we've lived so much, and we really feel that we have some sense of power. But when you look at our leadership, kind of, really flailing right now, and some of it is justified because nobody knows this beast, but there's a lot of flailing going on. Is so whether it is, like in India, one of the things we are facing right now is there's tons and tons of grain, rice and wheat, which is saved in the granaries there, and yet we are not able to mobilize those resources. And so, do you see that? What kind of things can we put in place? In fact, I'm thinking right now that in these, maybe even this hacker community, right, this developer community, one of the things we could be doing is marrying the app world with the brick and mortar world, right? So, right, I was just listening to a conversation going on between a journalist and the minister of state, the central government minister who is in charge of food and food security. And the question from the journalist was, why are you not releasing this rice and wheat that we have in tons? And the answer seems to be that it's because we don't have the resources. We will need X million dollars to get to get these things out of these godowns, put them into trucks, and distribute them to the last mile, and that would take millions of dollars, right? And so the conversation was, we just don't have those resources. I mean, how ridiculous is that?
Yeah, but I think that's exactly it. I think the hacker community can create solutions for that. I mean, if you think about the fact that, if you crowdsource like Uber, a bunch of trucks that would be willing to go and pick it up and redistribute it, it's sort of a no-brainer. And I was just talking to somebody who's in Morocco, and she was saying that Morocco's actually raised more money for this pandemic. It's the nation that's raised the third largest amount of money for the pandemic, but it's all come through individuals, right? There's a story also in the New York Times the other day about how farmers in the US are throwing away massive amounts of produce right now because they have no way of redistributing it, and all the restaurants have shut down, right? That is ludicrous. Like the fact that if we think about that, it's just wrong. So I think that's where the hacker community could step in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you would hope also some of the bigger technology companies would have stepped in to solve some of these problems, but actually, they don't. Because the only thing they follow right now is good PR and profitability, right? And so at this moment, there has to be some other level of generosity, but also where else it could come from is, most certainly the innovation community.
You just said something extremely important, which was about the Uber kind of a thing, right? So let's say there are apps in place which can just in time spontaneously come together in these moments of crises and leverage something like Uber. You're spot on.
Yeah, you've had Shahidi that did that with news back in the day in Africa. Mm-hmm. In San Francisco, you have a similar thing that does it for like ugly foods, and it gives it, the ugly fruit, whatever it's called, the stuff that people can't sell, and it gives it to the homeless population. There already are apps, that exist. That concept could just be reapplied to something like this if we could do it quickly in real time. And I think that's the really exciting opportunity that's available right now to the hacker community.
So how about we do one thing, Lara, in terms of real concrete action? How about we do a little pilot, between Boma and the Motwani Foundation and Code 19, where we see, let's see if we can develop at least one app and test it out in Delhi, maybe, where you have lots of these granaries where they're saving food. Let's see if we can do this. How about we concretely try and develop something here for just distribution of these grains, and without, without putting the burden on the government, because the government is saying they don't have the money.
Well, and I think it's not only grain. I think you could hack an app that says what I have access, or what I have excess of, and what do I need, or who would need this, right? And so connect the dots between, things that people want to give and things that people desperately need, right? And do it with AI, and do it in real time, and do it in a way. And then if there's friction in how that happens, there's also a way that it connects to something else that'll open source it in a way that people can contribute to that piece of it, right? I think.
So Lara, do you realize something? You just spoke about $1 billion startup idea right there.
Exactly. We just need someone now to build it.
You're so right about that. And if only we could develop an app, right? Let's say
it all needs to happen now in real time. We have to hack it quickly, right? Because this is the pandemic. The other thing is, the other piece that I think about a lot in this moment is there's so many learnings going on about, what we need to do for future pandemics, right? And who's capturing that and designing something in a way that, if this will happen again, like, that we behave differently, or that we have different solutions.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to Scripps the other day, and they were saying they're talking to some big, pharma companies about whether they'd open source some of the some of their, pharma, to kind of have a toolbox of things that we could tap into at a moment like this. But the reality is the lawyers will get involved, and that'll be a lovely PR release, and then it'll be over, right? So,
but I think this is, currently we could, I think in India, the whole sort of the liability community is still weak. The lawyer community is still weak, and I think if you're coming from the right place, right, our heart is in the right place. What we are trying to do right now is come up with a solution where if people have excess of something, how do they distribute it real time to people that are desperately in need, using an app and using Uber-like services, connecting that.
I have extra X, you need Y, and let's just connect the dots and help it get.
So what should we call it? What should we call this app? Should we call it I don't need this.com? What do you think it would be? What would you, give me a suggestion?
It's too late. It's 20 to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll wake up in the morning and I'll have a great idea for you. I'll sleep on it.
Okay, send me some possible names. I'm really going to kick this off, Lara, because I think it's doable. I really think it's doable. And my God, 6,000 people that registered for our hackathon. It is just, we are just grateful. We are just, delighted that they've put in 72 hours, hacking up all kinds of solutions to meet the bottom of the pyramid. And, I think it is going to have an impact on reducing suffering of some of the, some of the worst hit people in India. So Lara, thank you so much for your time. And I wish you happy, healthy, and safe next few days before we speak again.